when I think of the stereotypical prepper, I'm thinking of all these like MREs and little disgusting things no one ever wants to eat unless there's some cataclysm, basically. But
Yeah.
what you're saying is like, no, like try to just accumulate a lot of the things that you actually like to eat, and that will serve you in the event that something bad happens, but it will also serve you in the event that something bad doesn't happen. That makes
If
a lot
you
of
have to
sense.
go more than 2 months on a food supply, we've got really much bigger problems at that point. We're into like movie level stuff if we're there. So that's kind of what I recommend people try to do is try to get to where you could maybe get bored, right? And maybe you'd get tired of eating the same thing, but try to get to where you could have good 60 days without leaving your home and nobody could starve. And if you can get there, you'll be able to get through most things. Because I also teach like an order of preparedness to start thinking like the first disasters to prepare for are the ones that happen to only you. Losing a job, a loved one gets cancer, something like that. And then to think about things that are neighborhood-sized disasters because they're also more likely to happen to you than something global. And then think more of like a regional, then like a statewide, then like national, then like global, and do your prepping starting from the individual level.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, iCoin Technology. iCoin has just released a sleek new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone, with a little touch screen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, no GPS. It's a strictly physically cold hardware wallet. Like I said, it's got a high-res 3-inch touchscreen. It's got a camera for air gapping the wallet. It's got optional Bluetooth compatibility. And it's really a brand new UI, UX experience for a hardware wallet, making it very accessible, easy to use, not intimidating. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like iCoin Wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. Go to iCointechnology.com today and use promo code Bitcoin23 for 30% off of this new sleek hardware wallet. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Ledn. Ledn lets you do more with your digital assets. For instance, Ledn offers a B2X loan product that lets you leverage your existing Bitcoin to buy even more Bitcoin. Or you can also get traditional Bitcoin collateralized US dollar loans through Ledn as well. Ledn also offers both Bitcoin and USDC denominated savings accounts, letting you generate yield on your digital assets. Recently, Ledn has launched a Bitcoin mortgage product as well that lets you use Bitcoin to buy a home or finance one that you already own. So go to ledn.io, that's LEDN.io today to sign up.
Jack Spirko, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Robert, thanks for having me on. This is a really big honor.
Great to have you here, man. By way of quick introduction, you are the host of the Survival podcast. I appeared on your show previously, and I wanted to have you on to talk about your world a little bit. And you've been doing this podcast game for a really long time. Sounds like back when there were people were listening to podcasts on actual iPods. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that story of how you got into podcasting.
So in 2008, I was at the height of my success in corporate America. I was a partner in a holding corporation. I had a really good partner named Neil, and he was kind of guy that has access to the type of financial advisors that don't talk to people that are, worth even a couple $1,000,000. They're really high-end people. And so I knew that recession at the time was coming and coming hard. We were restructuring the companies, and we had a company that did web design and development and marketing. And I had a client that wanted a podcast as part of the blog. Ironically, this guy was a financial advisor and probably got hammered in that recession. But we got the job. I brought it to one of my developers, and he's like, I know how to do all this stuff, but podcasting was so new. He's like, I don't really know how to do this part of it. So I actually started the show because I wanted to, and I also had to figure out how to do it. So I started the show with like a $20 Plantronics headset and a little MP3 recorder. And after about a week of doing it every day in the morning, I would do it in the morning and I'd listen to it in the afternoon going home, like to critique it and try to make it better. I realized I didn't want to punch a hole in the wall anymore when I got home. Like, it was venting, And so I set a goal to get 1,000 listeners, in my first 6 months by the end of the year. We ended up getting like 2,500. You mentioned iPods. We actually gave away in a listener contest an iPod with "Be an Ant, Not a Grasshopper" on the back of it. So that's how long ago that was. 18 months into it, I went full-time. So that was the end of 2010. And I've been full-time as a podcaster since 2010 now.
Wow. So you're an official podcaster OG, I think.
I think that qualifies.
Yeah, it's a long time. Now, were you were just doing solo podcasts initially then? You didn't have guests on?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to if you're driving in a car, weaving in and out of traffic. So I wanted to get to where I could do guests and I could do listener calls and stuff like that. And so that as soon as I got off the road, I started bringing guests in. And right now I do like one guest show a week, some weeks, 2 other weeks. I still do standalone shows. My Monday shows are usually like listener feedback stuff. It's all things that people are asking from the audience. Tuesday, I usually do a Bitcoin-centric show. I'll have somebody like you on. Wednesday, it'll be somewhere in our world of preparedness and regenerative ag and permaculture. I'll have with another guest. Thursday, I usually take a subject and I teach it. So it's a true educational, I'm doing a lot with biochar right now for soil improvement. So it'll be something very academic like that. Friday, I have this group of really amazing people I've built over the year, like a cadre of experts. And people submit questions for them. So that show will basically be just me bridging together all the questions and their answers, and I take an anchor segment at the end of it. So it's a wide variety of stuff. And it's just, I think, like my advice to podcasters, you let your audience tell you what they want and then try to give it to them as long as what they're asking for makes sense. So the audience built it. The community around the show is what built it, not me.
Right. And so you've been at this game, I guess, for 15 years now, sounds like. And then how much has your audience grown? When you said 2,500 in the first 6 months, like where are you at today?
On the audio side, collectively through all the services, we'll get somewhere around 200,000 downloads per episode within like the first week after it's published. And then, obviously your downloads of older shows are pale in comparison to your newer ones.
Yeah.
All in, we have about a 200,000 strong community.
Wow.
Which is, it's, you can, and I mean, honestly, like people, if there's anybody in your audience that wants to like do podcasting full time, the way you build it is what's important. I was making a full-time living as a podcaster with 20,000 people. That it's not that hard if you're building things the right way and you adapt your revenue model to fit your community.
Interesting. And then so 200,000 people that are tuning in to learn about this philosophy of modern survivalism, I think you call it.
Yeah. When I started this, I wanted something I could like hang my hat on and anchor everything off. And so I went into Google and I started taking these different phrases and putting quotes around them so they were exact matches. And when I got to modern survivalism, nothing came up except like a sentence that ended in modern and the next one started in survivalism. Like, I can actually create something now. And I developed 12 tenets that everything we do is based on. And it's not like it's not like a Dave Ramsey show where we just talk about those 12 tenets every day, right? But everything comes off of those. And the first one, and I think it's what makes what we do really unique, is that everything that you do to prepare for disasters and emergencies should make your life better even if nothing goes wrong. Because then you're in a very pragmatic place. You're just making better decisions that are more non-brittle than the average person, which, sad to say, isn't that hard to do.
So can you give me some examples? So I want to walk through these 12 tenets because there's a lot of overlap here, I think, with the notion of self-sovereignty that is often discussed in the Bitcoin community. And I'm very interested in kind of bridging the gap between these two worlds, because the Bitcoiner view in general is that Bitcoin is here to stay. It's going to continue to absorb purchasing power from inferior monies. Therefore, the state will shrink as an organizational model. So the big question mark, I think, for people that are down the Bitcoin rabbit hole is what happens next? Like, what do we do now? And it seems to me like this domain of modern survivalism or self-sovereignty is the key space to be exploring when you look beyond the success of Bitcoin into the future.
Yeah, I mean, we also have kind of 4 pillars, and the 4 pillars are self-sufficiency, self-reliance, independence, and liberty. So that's the core ethos of the community. So, you could start kind of with, people use 2 words or phrases very interchangeably, and to me, they're not. Self-reliance and self-sufficiency. So self-reliance, to me, is measured in time. So if I have a generator and enough gasoline to run all my electricity for 2 weeks, then I have 2 weeks of self-reliance for power. Self-sufficiency is measured in percentages. So if I have an off-grid system, for instance, of solar panels that provide me 50% of the energy I use on a regular basis, I'm 50% self-sufficient because it's ongoing. So there's a lot to having sovereignty in that. And I mean, what you're hitting on is if government shrinks, then a lot of things we rely on government for, even if we don't like government, we do have to do for ourselves.
Sure.
And that's where, that's where sovereignty steps in, where, okay, if you're not going to have, let's say, as large a police force, you're going to have to provide some of your own security, right? If we're not going to have government subsidized agriculture, food's going to be more expensive, and we need to think better about how we're going to acquire our food. Right. If the food itself is polluted in garbage, which most of it is, I'm pretty sure you're aware of that, knowing your lifestyle, that is doing something about that, then we might need to do that anyway, just so that we are eating high quality, nutritious food that's not poison, because most of what people are eating today is industrial level waste and poison, and no nutrient density in the food whatsoever. So all of that aligns with the concept of if the state decreases, or if it goes the other way, if the state explodes in a last rage of an attempt to control things, which I think is very possible as well, you need to be able to look out for yourself, because we're moving into a lot of places it feels like law enforcement can do nothing for you, but they can do something to you, and you're really into tyranny at that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. Can't do a lot for you, but can do something to you. So this first tenet, you say everything you do should improve your position in life, even if nothing ever goes wrong. So this is not, I think a lot of people have this concept or notion of, preppers, preparedness, as people building shelters and buying canned food and, waiting for the bomb to drop, something like that. But what you're saying is something different, right? You're just saying improve your lifestyle across these various dimensions in a way that would also be resilient to some catastrophic type event. So can you give me some I guess concrete examples of this? Like what are ways in which you can just improve your position in life that's even if nothing goes wrong, like you will still be glad that you did it?
And look at something like eliminating consumer level debt. The person that does that and then has more capital to spend building their life and investing and saving for retirement or investing in a business is clearly better off than the person that's saddled with $100,000 worth of consumer level debt. I'm not completely anti-debt. I think I'm not going to buy a house for cash. I can do more with the house than the cost of servicing the mortgage, even with the rates we have. But consumer level debt is toxic. It's actually one of the other tenets, right? But you're still better off if you do that. If you have some level of alternative energy, some backup power or something like that, eventually, especially the way systems are getting to now, if you're smart about how you install it, where you source your materials, it cuts your electric bill. So now you're back to having more money. But when the power goes off, you're also better off. Whether it goes off for a week, a day, a month, you're better off having some form of backup power than not, yet you're still better off having that backup power in the regular world. You look at something like many preppers get into permaculture, gardening, things like that. How many people out there garden that have no concern about preparedness whatsoever because of the benefits of growing your own food? So all these things, and as we go through the rest of them, you can keep always thinking back to that anchor tenet number one, how this is actually a good way to live, even if we don't have some sort of massive global disaster like a, scamdemic or whatever it is that actually does disrupt the entire global chain.
Yeah, so that's a good one on energy, right? To just produce some of your own energy gives you some resilience by being independent of the grid, but at the same time, even if you don't need to be independent of the grid, it could just reduce your energy cost footprint.
Right.
That's interesting. And then that rolls into tenets 2 and 3, which are related to eliminating debt and producing your own food. So like, how extensive do you suggest people get into that? I mean, I guess the debt thing, as you said, it depends on the type of debt, right? Consumer debt, bad, long-term, fixed rate.
Debt on an appreciating asset makes sense, right? I mean, there's always a possibility of a massive real estate crash if you're a real estate investor, but if you're an investor in anything, there's always that potential for loss, right? For the average person, owning a piece of property probably makes a lot of sense, and doing with that is probably the way most people will do it.
Yeah, and as bad as fiat currency is, and we outline that very heavily and clearly, hopefully, on this show, it's still, there's an incentive to borrow in a fiat currency paradigm because dollars are depreciating every year. So it makes sense to borrow strong dollars and pay back weakening dollars.
Correct.
Over time. But you have to be very intelligent with that. You definitely don't want to borrow to fund present consumption.
Borrowing $80,000 to buy a car, right? And there's people that if they do it, and I don't care. The person that's worth $100 million, they just want to drive a $200,000 car. That I don't care what they do. But the average American today, that is a middle income person, is out, spending $60,000-$80,000 on a vehicle on a 5 to 7 year car loan on a depreciating asset. I bought my first house for $84,000. And now you got people buying SUVs for $80,000. That type of debt is very damaging to the average person's total life, because I teach that you don't measure debt in dollars, you measure it in time. How long are you a slave to that debt? And when you start looking at it that way, and you start realizing what the average person earns and how much of their life goes to paying for a car or paying credit card bills or paying student loans, because people take student loans like they're never going to have to pay them back or something. If you want to be an engineer and you go to a good engineering school and you have a pretty high student loan debt, it probably still works. But most people today, the biggest debt they're carrying, if they're not homeowners yet, is student loan debt. And most of their degrees are, frankly, they're worthless. They're absolutely worthless. So that all has to be cleaned up in your life, because if you don't do it, it's like having cancer and not worrying about it. It only gets worse. And it's kind of interesting that a person that has a cancer that hasn't been diagnosed can look really healthy, but it's metastasizing through their body, and then one day it all hits them. Debt works the same way. You'll see a person that lives a little bit more meager existence may look like they're not as financially healthy as their neighbor who's got a golf club membership and drives an $80,000 car, and his wife has a $70,000 car. And this guy looks like he's doing really great, but by the time they're in their 40s, they're getting divorced. They hate each other. Most of that comes from monetary problems. So we get rid of that. That's kind of like why it's number two. Moving into food, it's, preppers always want to talk about guns, and got guns. And we talk about a means of defense as well. But I've only been in a few fights in my whole life. And I actually used to throw people out of a nightclub for a while as a side hustle, right? And I've only ever been in a few fights in my life. I was shot at one time when I was in the Army, didn't care for it. But I've had to eat pretty much every day of my life. So when we move into food production, that's just, there's a reason people say I have to keep a roof over the head, stay out of debt, and put food on the table, produce some of your own food. And the reason people say that like a cliche is because it's true. It's what fuels a home. It's what keeps, what you worry about most if you're a father is whether or not your kid's going to eat tomorrow. Like when your kid's not going to eat tomorrow, you'll go out and do things that you would, as a moral person, you would never do when it comes to feeding your children. So those two are linked in a significant way.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm looking at tenet 4 now. This is also a point we make repeatedly on the show. Taxation is theft. Can never be anything but theft so long as it's not consensual. If you don't have the right to say no or turn down a proposal, right, or a counterparty to a transaction, if you can't say no to them and walk away, if they can force you to engage in the transaction, then it's theft. So I think tenet 4, you are advocating for tax optimization, it looks like.
Yeah, that's the first step, right? So I've always said it this way. The tax code is this huge, giant pile. It looks like 2 super phone books from the 1980s from like New York City or something. It's massive. But the thing about it is the people that wrote it, they wrote it for themselves. They didn't write it for you. Only about 5% of it is what you have to do. The other 95% of it is how you get out of doing it. So, I really push entrepreneurship because it opens up a tremendous amount of ways to pay less taxes and move things from the expense in your life column to expense in your business column. Now, I'm not talking about illegal things here. I'm talking about running the code and having a good CPA, and if your concern's a little bit larger, also having a tax attorney, and making sure that you've optimized your life to pay them as little as you legally can straight out of the gate.
Right.
And that's the same thing with alternative energy. It's the first thing you do. Make sure your house is insulated. Optimize the efficiency first, right?
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. Reduce the leaks in the ship. And I have a master's degree in taxation, funny enough as that sounds. And one of the main things you learn is the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. Right? Tax evasion is you are skirting the law, breaking the law, whatever it is. Tax avoidance is the legal avoidance of taxation. So you're exploiting these loopholes, that 95% of the tax code that you mentioned. And that, you should definitely do that if you don't like to be stolen from. Tenet 5, looks like you are advocating for food storage. Correct. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I do think it makes sense to have a deep pantry and to have enough food that your family doesn't have to worry if something goes wrong and you can't get out to go buy food or there's some sort of supply chain disruption like many of us experienced. But I also don't believe that it makes sense to go out and buy like a whole bunch of crap in 5-gallon buckets that's just repackaged noodles and beans from, I won't name any names, but it probably brings some to mind if people know the industry at all. Eat what you store what you eat. So I try to teach people to make your home like a grocery store or a convenience store in itself. So we teach things like copy canning. If you do use canned food, it'd be a perfect example of you go to the store, you were going to buy 1 can this week, buy 2, and then the next week buy 2, and do that until you stack that back until you have like about as much as you use in a month or 2, and then do it with another item, and then do it with another item, and then do it with another item, and keep doing that until you build that level of inventory, just like a store does, and run it just like a store. New stuff goes in the back, old stuff's at the front, so that you're optimizing your rotation. Because what happens, and I've been to people's homes, from the audience, and you get in a closet and they have all this food piled in there. Most of it's way out of date and what have you. And they almost apologetically, they're like, I did this before I started listening to you or whatever. It doesn't make sense to store food that you're only going to eat if the world ends. Right? I mean, to drive this point home, I saw a thing on a TV show, was it Pawn Stars? dude was selling a can of saltine crackers from the 60s from the bomb shelters. And I'm like, are those things still around? I found one on eBay, so I bought one for like $30. So I've got a 1966 can of saltine crackers, right? That mindset of like, we're just going to put this down in a hole, and if the nuclear bombs go off, we're going to eat our crackers. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But keeping that food inventory, and I also believe in keeping, I call it food on the hoof. So I run a little farm. I've got ducks, I've got chickens, I've got geese. They don't require any energy to store them. They produce eggs, but if I need to eat one, they're right there and they're available. But, I took a look at, what's the ROI on stored food? 2020, the ROI was 3.5% across the year. 2021, 11.8%, and 2022, 11.4%. Now, those are not 3 years of bad returns, right? So you're going to eat this food anyway, so why not capitalize on buying it before it goes up? Also capitalize on things like opportunity buys. So when something goes on sale, you buy more of it, and then you use that to build, your stockpiles up. And there's some other parts of this interlock with it, because like I eat a lot of meat. So I have like 3 chest freezers, right? So I have plenty of fuel and generator capacity to make sure I don't lose that in a long-term down scenario. And it's really like a holistic way to do things. I do recommend people consider at least some of the specialized long-term storage foods, but more as like an adjunctive thing, and still to use them from time to time. We even have people in the audience now, they're doing their own freeze drying. I'm in some discussions with a company called Harvest, right? We might bring them on as a sponsor soon. Because as you start to produce food, you start to realize you can produce a lot more than you can use right away.
Storing things you like to eat, right? It's common sense, but when I think of the stereotypical prepper, I'm thinking of all these like MREs and little disgusting things no one ever wants to eat unless there's some cataclysm, basically. But what you're saying is like, no, like try to just accumulate a lot of the things that you actually like to eat, and that will serve you in the event that something bad happens, but it will also serve you in the event that something bad doesn't happen. If
you have to go more than 2 months on a food supply, we've got really much bigger problems at that point. We're into like movie level stuff if we're there. So that's kind of where I recommend people try to do, is try to get to where you could, maybe you'd get bored, right? And maybe you'd get tired of eating the same thing, but try to get to where you could have good 60 days without leaving your home and nobody could starve. And if you can get there, you'll be able to get through most things. Because I also teach like an order of preparedness, to start thinking like the first disasters to prepare for are the ones that happen to only you. Losing a job, a loved one gets cancer, something like that. And then to think about things that are neighborhood-sized disasters, because they're also more likely to happen to you than something global. And then think more of like a regional, then like a statewide, then like national, then like global, and do your prepping starting from the individual level, right? Like there is a lot of fear out there right now, and I understand where it comes from. I had a history professor on yesterday, and we talked about the crumbling empires of the past and the similarity to the United States, and what does the crumbling of the U.S. empire look like? And it's not a pretty thing to consider. But in the end, it probably also won't look like the fear porn that's put out there, even if we go that far. But you still have to get prepared to deal with the things that would happen to you first. And so going in that logical progression keeps people from making really bad, stupid decisions, like running out and buying $60,000 worth of MREs, which I know a person who did it, right? I'm like, wish you could get your money back, man. I lived on MREs for 6 months in Honduras when I was 19 years old.
Really?
Did not care for it. That was 1991.
Can you tell me about that? Was that like why? What happened?
So I was stationed in Panama, and I did the dumbest thing you could ever do when you're military. You volunteer for something. So I volunteered as part of an attachment to go into the mountains of Honduras for 6 months. And we were there to build roads and schools as part of a very much larger operation called Fortis Caminos at the time, which is Strong Roads. And so we built this road in the middle of the Agua River Valley up in the mountains. It was about 12 miles. And there was a National Guard camp on one end and a regular army, which is where we were on the other end. And we basically connected those two because there were already existing roads up to there. And that was a pretty interesting project. And, talk about abject poverty, the people that live there. But because of the remote nature of it, we ate regular breakfast and regular dinner, but we ate MREs for lunch every day for that whole 180-day deployment. And there were 12 of them at the time. There was 12 different ones. 2 of them were unedible. So you got 10 things that you're going to eat, for that long a period of time. That, like today, they have all the heaters and stuff. We didn't have that then. We would just take the meat entree and throw it up on the roof of the tent in the morning. And by lunchtime, it would literally be simmering from the heat off the canvas. It was, it was a good thing to have done, but it's not something I'd want to do again now when I'm 50 years old.
Wow. So yeah, you had a taste of that modern survivalism. Back then, right? Wow.
A GP medium tent with 7 other dudes for 6 months. That gets old.
Oh my goodness.
Pissing in a tube. So we had for a bathroom, we had these 4-inch PVC pipes shoved in the ground with lime around them. And they ended up having to put wire over the tops of them because the freaking bees would go in there. So you and then the bees come out and, they're the Africanized angry bees.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's some good memories from it too, but it was, it definitely made me not want to re-enlist. I'm like, it could end up somewhere like this again.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. Okay. Looking back at the tenets here, tenet number 6, looks like you're basically saying prepare for the threats that you are actually most likely to face as an individual, right?
Yeah,
I guess this is an echo of basically what you just said. Okay. So going to tenet 7. All right, this one's interesting. So alternative energy. This is a difficult one, right? Like how can we properly phase into energy independence? I think I'm reflecting on the Kissinger quote, right? Like if you control food, money, and energy, you control the world, kind of thing. So I would assume in modern survivalism, you'd want to be food, money, and energy independent as much as possible. But energy is tricky because our lifestyles consume an incredible amount of it, and most of us are attached to a centralized grid of some kind. So how do you recommend people phase into energy independence?
So the first step is to think about efficiency. We're all, the boring stuff. Do you have weather seal around your doors? What's your insulation capacity, et cetera? Because that's a big part of why we spend so much energy. Because energy, as much as people hate paying electric bills, when you think about what we get by just flipping a switch, it's actually pretty cheap, right? Energy is incredibly inexpensive in our world. That's why so many of our modern conveniences are even possible. When you think about, how much energy would it take to move an 18-wheeler up a 6% grade for 2 miles, and then we can do that with, a cup of diesel fuel. And then that cup of diesel fuel, we complain about the price, but that cup of diesel fuel is like 50 cents. And if we had to do that with human power, how much more expensive would that one little thing be? So we get the efficiency worked out first. And I like people to learn how to do things. So if they want to go full on solar, they can do a lot of the work themselves because there's a huge portion of the cost is actually in the labor. So let's do everything small scale first from basic learning projects. So we, build a simple backup, battery backup system. That can be like a charger you buy at Walmart and 4 marine batteries linked together. And I won't try to explain how to do that because somebody does it wrong. They're going to mess things up. The series and parallel, get that right, and an inverter. And then you have a little bit of backup power, a hell of a lot more than the UPS that's backing up my power for my computer with 4 of those batteries. Well, now you've got a battery backup. So now you can run something if the power goes out for a time. Well, now let's get a small generator. Well, now we can recharge the batteries, right? So now I can have some overnight power and be quiet so I'm not advertising to everybody in the middle of, let's say, a storm's come through and you got looters, and I'm advertising here we are. So now the generator's running in the daytime, the battery's running at night like a submarine, silent indeed. And so now we have that. Well, now we can add small-scale solar to that. Now we can go out and get a few hundred watts of solar panels. We can get a charge controller. We can hook that up to our battery bank. So the battery bank now begins to actually run off solar. Well, now I've got a mini solar system. I've got, something that the nefarious company might call a solar generator. There's no such thing as a solar generator. Generators are power on demand. You're talking about batteries and solar panels and a charge controller. So now you have that. Well, what you've just done is taught yourself everything you need to know to build an off-grid solar system. You really now could do everything yourself if you wanted to. You might not choose to, but you've made a scale model, and all you're doing, and you might want a little help from an electrician so you don't burn your skin off your hands or whatever, kill yourself, but it's the same process to do that. And then you can look at whether you want to be grid-tied backup battery or what have you. The problem that most people have when they get with these companies, guys come around and say they're going to put you up on solar power, and you think, oh, this will be great. Now I'll have power if the grid goes down. No, because the most expensive thing you're going to buy is the batteries, not the panels. So most of these are straight grid-tied systems, meaning they cut your bill, and if they're producing more than you're using, you can sell it back to the grid in most states anyway. But if the grid's down, you're not running because you have no reserve. So then there's also grid tied with battery backup. That means we have grid power, we have battery backup. Now if the grid goes down, there's a transfer switch that should be installed to do automatically when it says there's no power here, because now I'm producing power. If I'm producing power and I'm still tied to that grid, and there's a lineman out there working, he can get killed because he thinks the power's off and I'm pushing power onto the grid. So you have that transfer switch. And now you can run, as much production and storage capacity as you have. So you transition to that. You don't go straight to it. And then what's your climate like? What's going to be the best decision for you? What's the ROI on time? We have to think about that. Building a solar heating of some way is often a better play for people than just straight photovoltaics for electricity. So it's very easy to even just heat one room in your house during the daytime if you live in a sunny climate, even when it's very cold out. I don't want to get into exact specifications, but it's basically just a box with glass and black paint on the inside and some aluminum piping or repurposed aluminum cans and a tube. And you can heat a room by just setting that in the sun and plugging that into a window. Or you can go to a level of, solar hot water where you have it professionally installed or you buy professional equipment for it. And just move into it slowly and consider going larger across time rather than trying to go from I'm on grid, now I'm off grid. Because for most people, the economics of that don't work. It's not that it wouldn't be a great thing. If you're wealthy, by all means, it's not going to hurt your long-term balance to just go full on off grid, go ahead and do it. But in most instances, I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, interesting.
There's another way to approach it too that's really important to look at for people who are looking for land. So, they'll say it's a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year payback on a lot of this stuff based on the current cost of electricity and projected price raises and stuff. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be almost immediate as well. So there's a lot of land out there that people write off and say, well, I'm not going to buy that land because it doesn't have power to it, and it would be prohibitively expensive to do that. So that land sells for a lot less. So if you can go in and put in $30,000 of solar equipment, and then it is part of the build of your house onto a piece of land that you bought for $30,000 less because it doesn't have power, and often it would be even a more significant delta, then that system paid for itself. It paid for itself the day you put it in because it was less expensive than bringing grid power in. And there's a lot of cherry-picking opportunities like that with land sales out there because nobody wants to go through the trouble to do that. You're just going to find yourself generally living more remotely, and that's another personal choice thing. I like urban rural fringe. I live in the middle of nowhere is what it looks like. I can do anything I want. I don't even have building codes. I can be in downtown Fort Worth in 25 minutes. I mean, that's kind of best of both worlds if you can skin it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially I had a conversation yesterday with a guy that put me onto this, it's called Swanson's Law. It's almost like the Moore's Law for solar technology. And apparently the efficiency of solar technology has been doubling every 22 months for some period of time. And so buying land like that, not only could that investment, I guess you could get the land at a discount, but assuming that solar technology continues to progress, that may be even a bigger boon to investing in land of that sort over time.
Yep. Yeah.
Very
It does keep getting less expensive. I think we're going to reach the potential of those types of gains not going up that rapidly anymore, because what they're building now is so much more efficient. The place to eke out more now is in the battery world, and that's if you look at Elon Musk and Tesla, it's not a car company.
Mm-hmm.
It's a technology company, and its primary technology is batteries.
Right.
That's what the Tesla car is to the Tesla battery operation what the hamburger is to real estate for McDonald's. That's how that's working.
Got it. Very, very interesting perspective on that. So that was tenet 8 too, right? Is just owning land, just owning land outright. That makes you obviously land that you can defend, protect, serves your needs and purposes, etc.
The way I described it is going from home to homestead. Many, many years ago, I read, like most people that ever get into like thinking differently about money, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he talked about how most people's homes were actually put in the asset column. It's really a liability. And my first thought was it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. And so I grew up in small town coal region of Pennsylvania, 1970s and 80s. My family was quite poor. We did a lot of the stuff that I do now because we needed to, right? So we grew a garden because we needed more food. We went hunting, not just because it was fun, but because it was a significant part of what we ate every year. And our homestead is what enabled everything that we did. It's what tied us to our community. It's what enabled us to have great relationships with some of the older families where we would share our garden produce with them. And there was a a true community, a reciprocity that came with that. And that home had been in the family since like 1898 or something like that. Is when my great-grandfather gave it to my grandfather to take over eventually. And to me, that is how we should look at our property, is what can it do for me? Instead, what people have are basically four walls and a roof that they pay an awful lot of money to be in very infrequently. They spend most of their time away from home, and their homes don't produce anything. So owning land is true wealth if you make it produce for you. And in today's day and age, like starting businesses is so easy to do today. To me, everybody that has any inclination for it anyway should be doing something entrepreneurial with their property. And the things we can do today are, the technology that we can use didn't exist when I started doing this, let alone when I was a kid. What I mean by that is, you get a property, it's 10 acres, you put a nice pond on it, you put some nice amenities on it, you get to live there, that's great. You throw in 3 or 4 tiny houses. You can rent those tiny houses for more than people are renting full-size houses because people want the novelty of one house. So now you're making that land produce revenue, right? And you have nice pictures to put on Vibro or whatever. And so that mindset has to go with land ownership. I do get kind of cross with a lot of the younger people, and I think it's just an excuse for why they don't want to buy a house. It's because they can't, where they say, you'll never own your land because you have to pay property tax on it. Well, if you're renting, you're paying my property taxes, so I'm your landlord.
Right.
So if you feel better about paying your tax through me, that's fine, but I think that it should be a goal of every reasonable adult to become some level of real estate holder, whether it's just personal property or investment property.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And yeah, the property tax is a pass-through, no question about that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be renting you the property in the first place.
Now, I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now, let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. There's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. Like, I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi lets you use Bitcoin privately while still maintaining full control over your money. Specifically, Wasabi Wallet is an open source, non-custodial wallet with privacy built in by default. By using Wasabi, you're effectively putting the private back in private property. Wasabi Wallet is an easy-to-use privacy wallet that can support any amount of Bitcoin transactions. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download this state-of-the-art wallet software.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Bitcoin Conference 2023. This 3-day event will be held May 18th through 20th in Miami Beach. This is going to be the biggest event of the year, as it always is. And the past 2 years in Miami have simply been amazing. Day 1's Industry Day. Days 2 and 3 are going to be open to general admission. And I'd say this is a great place to go and network with Bitcoiners or even look for a job. Just a really all-around great experience. There's a fantastic speaker lineup, including Michael Saylor, Zoltan Pozar, Lynn Alden, Alex Gladstein, many others. And last year, we did a 10 million sats giveaway for this event, and we're going to do it again this year. So to get discounted tickets and enter for a chance to win 10 million sats, go to b.tc/conference/2023 and use code BREEDLOVE. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, LMNT. LMNT is a delicious electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. LMNT contains the ideal electrolyte ratio. It's got 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. LMNT has no junk. It's got no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS at all. LMNT is perfectly suited for people that are on a keto, low carb, or paleo diet. And as someone that eats a very heavy meat diet and does a lot of intermittent fasting, I simply love this stuff. So go to drinkelement.com/breedlove. That's DRINKLMNT.com/breedlove. And make sure to get a free sample pack with your first purchase.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's CASA, today to sign up and use discount code BREEDLOVE.
Okay, Tenet 9, this one's rather practical, right? Just standard preparations like insurance, emergency cash funds, long-term investments. How do you explain the details surrounding Tenet 9?
So I made sure that was part of the whole thing, primarily for the huge segment of the prepper community that basically forgoes all that because the world's going to end. The zombies are going to come or whatever. So screw it. I'm not worried about any of that stuff. And, you know, the guy says he's prepared and he's got a bunch of guns and bullets. He's also got 2 young kids and a wife, and he doesn't have insurance on his life. And, you know, I'm young and healthy. Well, you could get hit by a gravel truck tomorrow, dude, and you're dead. And your family has nothing. You're not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So start with making sure that if something goes wrong catastrophically in your life, that the people that depend on you are going to be looked after.
Uh-huh.
You know, that's, and, you know, a lot of people in the prepper industry don't see any advantage into long-term savings, especially like in, investing in stock or commodities or things like that. I think there's a lot of upside there. I definitely don't believe that you're well diversified because you have 5 different mutual funds and all your money is in an IRA. I don't think that is well diversified. You probably should have some piece like that, right? You should have some form of a long-term investment strategy. You should, again, working the tax code, I love tax deferred or tax exempt investment opportunities as well. So that's part of that. I definitely think people should have some cash somewhere that they can get to that's also secure. So like a firebox or a floor safe or something like that. So that if we have some sort of interruption to the ability to use your credit cards or whatever, you have the ability to pay reasonable expenses for a month, maybe, at least the things you would need to acquire. Because while that problem's going on, you can not pay the electric bill. Power's probably off anyway, right? But, you are going to need to make sure that you can see the things, or maybe you're going to need help. Maybe you're going to need somebody to clear a driveway for you because you were injured during whatever storm event took place. Being able to pay for it, that all matters a great deal. So my big thing is just all the stuff that comes with being a responsible ass grown man, right? Don't forego that because you're a prepper. And it's actually shocking how many people do. Because what happens, they get in that fear mode and all they're worried about is beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. And that is such a small piece of the whole, right?
Yeah. A lot more to it than beans, bullets, and Band-Aids for sure.
Yeah.
And this rolls directly into tenet 10, which is also very practical. I always like to cite this quotation by Musashi, this old warrior philosopher guy, and he has a number of wise things that he said, but one that really stuck with me at a young age was one of his strategic principles for living. And he always said that the way is in training. And that's something I try to live by. Like I'm always, every day, every action, I'm trying to get better at something all the time. And that just seems to be that ladder you need to be actively climbing in life to do well, right? To live well. And what you have here for tenet number 10 is to have a means of defense, acquire knowledge and training, and use it effectively. So this is probably something that's a little bit more traditionally associated with preparedness. How do you recommend people actually embrace this tenet?
So I think it makes a lot of sense straight out of the gate to go take a good firearms safety course. That's your first thing is safety. I've had to kind of back my brain around the fact that not everybody grew up with a gun cabinet that sat right in the living room, and when they were 6 years old, were getting to clean dad's deer rifle and all. Yeah. And realize that there's a lot of people that they get their hands on guns and they have no idea how to be safe. They didn't have a grandfather ready to smack them in the ear the first time they picked up a BB gun if they did something wrong. So get that safety training, and then take some level of like a level 1 tactical handgun course. Because all this force on force engagement stuff, and it's all fun, and I like to do it. We even do force on force engagement with like down capacity professional training airsoft rifles. So you're shooting ARs at each other, but you can't fire 3,000 rounds out of a electric gun. You have a 30 round mag, and it's a gas blowback, and it works. Like it's all fun, but it's not highly likely of how you'll ever need a firearm to defend yourself. If you ever need a firearm to defend yourself, you're probably going to rely on a handgun, right? So understand that and learn how to safely use it, and learn how to use it when things go wrong. Learn how to clear malfunctions and things like that. And so then also have, as part of a means of defense, it's not just a gun, right? It's procedures and protocols is what you really need. So I carry, so I almost always have a gun on me, but I'm not walking around when I'm doing my gardening with an AR on my back. But if shit was going really wrong, I might. Right? If we're having riots and what have you, then I might. So a procedure is the thing that you do and how you do it. A protocol is using the procedures in a specific way due to the situation. So like a level 0 protocol is the way you live your life every day. Things are a little bit more heightened, you move to a different level. And then honestly, if somebody comes to your home, you have to deal with that. But most of the things that happen to people that are bad, where they end up shot, stabbed, beaten, arrested, whatever it is, if they'd follow one rule, it would never happen. And that is, don't go to stupid places and do stupid things with stupid people. If you don't do that, 90% of what you worry about will never happen. I definitely recommend, if your state allows concealed carry, you do whatever you need to do to be able to carry. Yeah. I recommend, if you're a married couple and the spouse is open to it, that both spouses carry. I've talked to people that say, a woman will say something like, well, I don't worry, my husband's got my back. And well, who has his?
Right.
Right. If one of these shootings go down in a store or something like that, the more people who are armed and know what they're doing, the quicker that threat can be neutralized. Right. Yeah. So get professional training. And then, how far you want to take armament, that's up to you. Mm-hmm. I kind of recommend 22 rifle. It's very, very versatile, good for training, a shotgun, a centerfire rifle, and a personal defense handgun of some sort. But the and then once you have that and you have a little bit of training before you buy another gun, go get more training.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to train for? Like, I like to hunt, so I shoot sporting clays a lot. Right? Birds don't shoot back, but they taste good. So training is not just about tactical either, because the gun for me growing up was not just if somebody ever came to hurt us, we had a way to protect ourselves. It was a significant part of, the meat that we ate every year. In fact, where I went to school, I think it's still the case up there that they closed school on the first day of deer season. Because if they didn't, nobody would be there, because the boys are out hunting. Even if the girls didn't, they're sleeping in the truck. Back then, we got one deer per license. So you'd have a little girl sleeping in the back of the truck. She took her hunter safety course. Daddy, brother, uncle shoots a deer. Come on, honey, you got a deer. Take her out, put her tag on it. Because that was one more deer in the deep freezer that year. I also believe in carrying non-lethal defense, because now I have options. So a good pepper spray is a perfect example of this. And realize your threat might not always be a human. I had a neighbor who had a real asshole dog, a pit mix, real problematic animal, and I still didn't want to kill his dog. We were walking down the road. His dog came very, very aggressive at us, and I gave it a little tiny shot of pepper spray, and it went. It was much easier to go, dude, you need to control your dog. I had to pepper spray your dog, then to go, dude, here's your dog. So that was a dog. It could be a human. Having an option for non-lethal, I think, is a good thing as well. Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, that's a great point. Thank you for interjecting that one. We always prefer to deal with threats non-lethally, right? It's always an easier way. Okay, number 11. Yeah, I think advocating here for documenting all of this, right? Actually documenting the protocol in a way that is shareable with the family, accessible to the family, etc. Yeah. What are your thoughts here?
I did a show on this really early on. It was like in the 100s of episodes, and I did like episode 3245 today. So that's how far back that goes.
Wow.
And a master sergeant from the Marine Corps reached out to me and said it might be the most important thing you ever did or will do. And he said, because you covered it. And if anybody that wants that can go to my site, thesurvivalpodcast.com, and just type in documentation package in the search bar, and the whole show will come up on how to do this. But what I'm advocating is putting together a ringed binder. You just print everything out and put in it that has all the information that you would need if you were displaced, and how you would get the hell out of where you are if you had to go. So I believe in the rule of threes: 3 destinations, 3 routes per destination, and 3 rally points along each route. And that way there's one of these binders in every vehicle that you own, and an extra one at the house. And so now imagine there's some sort of scenario that requires evacuation. Your 17-year-old daughter's in high school. She's got a car. High school's that way. You need to go that way. You going to get her doesn't make sense, but she's also freaked out.
Right.
Well, if you say, honey, turn to page 13, look at that, take that route, and meet daddy at, rally point B. All of a sudden, not only do they know what to do, they feel like you have control over the situation. And to some level you do. You have a lot more control than most. And the reason you want 3 destinations and 3 routes to each is because the destination you thought you were going to may not be any better, and the route to get there may not work. So in that point, we have a total of 9 different options to get there. And we have different rally points. And we need those rally points because sometimes when this shit's going on, there are police and maybe National Guard saying, you can't stay here.
Yes.
So if you are supposed to meet somebody at your first rally point on that route and they tell you have to leave, you may have to leave.
Yeah.
And we've gone as far as to recommend people do things like have something you can throw on the side of the road. That basically, if you can't communicate because of whatever reason, when that person gets there and they see that you left that dead drop, they know you were already there and they know to proceed to the next place that you were forced to move, because maybe whoever forced you to move is gone.
Right.
So this is really a lot of forethought. This is bank accounts, access information. I recommend people do some form of simple encryption with that in case somebody got their hands on it. It won't work with the NSA, but your average idiot criminal's not going to be able to crack it. Maybe you add a 2 to every number.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Right.
Including things like phone numbers for contractors that would do things like clear your driveway, because you need that. First person that gets in connection is usually the first person to get service. Hotels that you would stay at. If you have animals, you should know where the pet-friendly hotels are. Be like, are you going to bug out to Marriott? I might. I might. It's better than a tent in a Walmart parking lot. How long am I going to be there? What's the situation? And people will always say, well, like when there's a disaster, all the hotel rooms are booked and you can't. Well, somebody booked them. It was the people that booked them first that booked them. It's not a convention, right? It's all the people that were displaced. So if you're prepared to do these types of things, you're in great shape. And having identical copies in all your vehicles when you're separated, because in a panic situation, as bad as trying to tell somebody what to do is without being standing next to them and showing them, in a panic situation, it's worse, right? So I try to tell people when it comes to training, to train yourself to where you can do the thing cold in the rain with a flashlight in your mouth at 3 o'clock in the morning. If you can do it under that level of stress, then you can do it. And if you can't do it under that level of stress, you have no idea where you'll break off of that. But this helps people deal with that separation and getting back together, putting their lives back together. I also do recommend things like a lot of data being held on like a USB stick or something like that. But the printable copy is incredibly important.
Well, it's so much good stuff there. It's, as you were saying that, what came up for me was something that I often cite on this show. And I say that optionality is the optimal strategy when you're facing uncertainty. So the way you described 3 paths, 3 rallying points, like you need options because you don't know which way the proverbial tree is going to fall, right? So I thought that was just really well said. And then I guess we're on tenet 12, right? Which is just personalize your plan, develop it, and implement it. It's kind of like the capstone tenet, I suppose.
Yeah, the reality is no one is ever going to do everything I did the way that I did it. And as a teacher, I need to accept that. I can either have an ego and think, well, they should, or I can accept reality. People do things that they see the most benefit in doing. If you look at it it's like diet and exercise. The reason people don't exercise and eat crappy diets is because you can get away with it for a long time. If you had a good friend and you found out he was like 35 years old and he died and it wasn't from a clot shot or something like that, he legitimately just died, and said, well, what happened? Well, he went a week not eating right and not exercising, right? You'd be exercising your ass off and eating right forever. But since you can get away with it, so people have this own self-interest motivation. So I might be really into gardening. Now, if I put it to where you have to have the garden and you're not into gardening at all, what happens is a person then says, well, this whole thing, I don't want to do this.
Right.
So you take, it's like a Jeet Kune Do. You take out of what I teach the things that you're ready to do and you implement them. And even if you never get to 100, if you get to 75, you're in a hell of a lot better shape than being at 0.
Right.
So you have to customize the plan. My plan won't work for everybody. It can't. I do fairly well financially. There are people that can't just go do the things that I've done over the years overnight. They're going to take a lot longer to get there. There's people that have a lot more money than me. Well, they can just fortify, they can make a few phone calls and get some contractors and then fortify everything and be off grid tomorrow. And so if that works for you, then you do that. But you have to customize it. But what really comes down to is what I call the golden rule of survival. Understanding that what you do matters. And I got to this in a roundabout way. I thought I should talk to people who deal with death. And the people that deal with death and people that didn't plan to die the most, where they actually get to deal with the person, to me, are oncologists, cancer doctor. Because guy's 40, he all of a sudden he has terminal cancer. He's not going to die tomorrow. That doctor gets to spend time with that patient. And I asked them, what is the number one reason that a person you didn't think would be a survivor was? And they all said they were the pain in the ass patient. They're the one they said, well, we should use this form of therapy. Why? What happens if we don't? They said if you had 2 people and one was a pain in the ass, and one just did everything you told them, but they both took the same program. They actually ended up doing the same thing in the end. The person that knows what they're doing matters is still more likely to survive because of the human nature and our will to survive and our will to fight through things. So if you don't understand that what you do matters, then nothing anybody ever tells you about survival will ever matter.
Right.
And it's an incredibly powerful thing. I've had more than one person tell me that they were thinking about killing themselves. One was a gentleman with pretty serious PTSD from the military. And he said he kept hearing me in his head say what you do matters. And it wouldn't let him do it. And it made him think of his kids, you know, and that was very early on in doing this. And it made me realize how important it is. Like, that's not something you should have to learn from a podcaster, that what you do matters. That's something ideally you should learn from your parents and your grandparents. But there's so much broken in our world today. That's why we have so much risk in our world today, because so many people are broken. So many systems are broken. And the ones that are broken, you know, they're spinning on kind of their last wheels. You know, for all the talk of what we're going to do wonderfully with agriculture, our existing agricultural system is really at the edge of what it can do, and it's beginning to fail. But you don't have to live with that. You have a choice.
Yeah.
So what you do matters. That's the most important thing I can ever get anybody to ever understand.
I love that. I mean, it's putting the emphasis on human action, which, you know, that's the title to Mises' great canonical work on economics. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yeah, it's all about what we do. It's all about how we act. It's not about your beliefs or what you say. It's just what you do in the world that ultimately defines you and defines history. Man, this has been really great. I appreciate you sharing the 12 tenets. I have to ask you though, how it seems like Bitcoin's a great fit with this.
Yeah.
Like, in what ways is Bitcoin first of all, is Bitcoin a great fit with that? And if so, how? And how are you integrating Bitcoin into your life and thinking about modern survivalism?
You know, there's so many ways that it's a great fit, but let's start off with like how I even found out about it. About 2012, my listeners started telling me about this Bitcoin thing, you know, and I didn't get it. About 2013, I started to actually buy a little bit, use it, started making Bitcoin for referrals. Back then, I think like a $10 referral to Coinbase, you made like 0.1 Bitcoin. That's how long ago that was. And I got into Bitcoin and I got it, or at least I thought I got it. I thought I understood it. That's what happens. That Dunning-Kruger curve gets you, you know. And then you realize, I don't know crap. And I got into shit coining for a while. And I'm a pretty good analyst, so I made some real money doing it. But I realized like it was all BS. None of it really made any sense, except Bitcoin is what really made sense. And if you're going to have a limited supply and a finite supply, then you can only have one. And I started learning more about first principles and things like that. And at the beginning, it was number go up.
Yeah.
But what I learned in like going through that 2017, 2018, 2019 bear market, freedom go up was way more important. And there are a lot of ways that it can integrate. Like we talked about alternative energy. I know a guy, you may know of him, Brian Harrington. He works for Choice.
Yeah, I know Brian. Yeah.
Right? Brian has a solar system on his house. He has an amp miner. It's an older one, but you know what he has. And he can only make so much energy to top the batteries up for the day. And as soon as that happens, his amp miner kicks in and uses the surplus energy until the sun goes down.
Yeah.
So he's using excess energy because he lives in California. It's not really, doesn't make sense. It's worth more money running that amp miner than it is selling it back to the grid.
Right.
The price they pay selling it back to the grid is crap, right? It's 10% of what you pay.
Yeah.
So that's one way that it can be integrated. I think long-term wealth strategy. We spent a lot of time talking about that today. I look at the series you did with Michael Saylor as it should be required listening by everybody that calls himself a Bitcoin enthusiast. But what he said, it really hit me there, was that the Bitcoin network is the most successful thing humans have ever built.
Yeah.
If you measure it by money within a 10-year cycle, like something with a 200% annualized return across a decade, you don't ignore that.
Right.
If you can concern yourself with wealth. I also think it is forever wealth. So we sell a t-shirt in our gear shop and it's got the Bitcoin B for bring, and it says bring back 7th generational thinking.
Right.
And
Okay.
it was that series that really got my head going to that place with it. And what made me think about back in my corporate world days, for a while, I was a regional VP of a company called Fluke Networks, and I had Virginia to Maine and over to Ohio as my territory. So that New York City was in there. And remembering being a young man walking around Manhattan and seeing some of these churches that were just gorgeous, like marble carved with just little sculpted. You couldn't build that today. These things were built in the 1800s when gold was money. And I see, Bitcoin is the new gold. And I know that a lot of people get triggered about that or whatever. I don't think they understand what people like myself mean when I say Bitcoin is the new gold or it's digital gold. It's hard, finite money. It's the hardest money ever made, but it's weightless.
Yeah.
I can send it to Tokyo in one 10-minute block. I could transfer $1 billion worth of wealth or 5, and no one can prevent that. It's programmable money. When I started seeing what Lightning's been doing over the recent years, like, entrepreneurship, huge part of what we teach. If you're not accepting Bitcoin, I don't know why. Why wouldn't you accept it as a form of payment? It's probably the way to get your hands on it. Adam Curry's work with the Value for Value Network and Podcast Index.
Yeah.
And then, apps like Fountain, and that's the one that really made it easier for the listener to share value with a podcast host. We've been, since August, almost every week, we're in the top 10 on Fountain. For support, because people see value in what we're doing. And this is, the reality of this is, though, Robert, the least popular content I have with my audience is Bitcoin content. It's the thing that I'm most resistant to. I got a lot of people, I guess, with Peter Schiff pictures on their wall at home. I don't know. It's a whole prepper mindset. It's not backed by anything. To me, what it's backed by is energy and security. Yeah. I know that stat is that stat. And I know when I said it to Robert, Robert got it. Robert has it. I can't double spend it. And you can't take it from me.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand the value in uncensorable, unstoppable money that's digital and weightless, I don't really know how to get through. But I just keep every week I get one or two people, I'm on board. I bought my first Bitcoin. I'm like, all right, let's just keep doing that.
Yeah. No, man. Wow. That's a hell of a rant. I think you just orange pilled me a little more, actually. We just have to let number go up, do its thing. That's the ultimate top of funnel for Bitcoin. And then people can do the work, right? They can do their own research, do their homework, and come down the rabbit hole and join us. But,
because I did it. You can't expect somebody to not do what you did.
Right, exactly.
I wasn't making it into a maxi overnight. I mean,
you learn through the pain, right? You learn through the pain, and time and pain, I think, is just what teaches you. Well, I don't know if it's just me, or I think there's a lot of people that have to learn the hard way. And I know, I get that's just the way we're wired, I suppose.
Yeah. But it's math, and I don't know exactly what will happen, but I know what the trend is.
Yeah.
And you just allow that to do its work. And it is frustrating, though, as a show host. I'm sure you experience the same thing. There's all this resistance to it. Well, it's $16,000 now. Well, maybe you should buy some. Like, well, because didn't you say when it went down you were gonna, and now it did, and you're not gonna because it went down. And it was like when the Elon stuff happened and Mike Saylor came out and it went on this huge run and it was like $50,000. That's when all the people that in my regular life, my IRL life, right? Yeah. How do I buy Bitcoin? How do I buy? Yeah. All my referrals were going crazy. Referrals to Strike and referrals to Swan and all that. I was getting 10 a day coming in, and I'm like, it's 2018 all over again. Yeah. It's the same thing. The FOMO kicks in. Everybody wants to buy. The accumulation trough happens. That's what I call it. We've been there for like a year now in the accumulation. This is where you go in hard, and everybody goes backwards.
Yeah, it's holding a mirror up to human nature, and it's amazing. It's an amazing journey, frankly. I've learned so much about myself and others, and I'm just very grateful to be alive at this time in history. So, and I think there's a lot of overlap again between all all the ethos of Bitcoin and the implications of Bitcoin seem to have tremendous overlap with this concept of modern survivalism. that it's ultimately, if I had to put a term to it, it's just self-sovereignty, right? It's just individual sovereignty.
It's also a quest for truth, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I get a lot of Bitcoin people into my community. That's easier than turning my people into Bitcoin people.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And once we break out was to reach into the Bitcoin community and say, come over here and learn the rest of this.
Yeah.
But I think the reason this overlaps here, and if you look, people are like, all the Bitcoin guys are like code bros, carnivores, and it's like, into alternative energy, and like they're all the same people. Well, I think what actually happens is you find the truth about something that you've been lied to about your entire life.
Yeah.
And there's a natural outcome of that. And that is, well, what else have I been lied to?
Right.
About? So
right.
People that maybe come into kind of the low carbohydrate ancestral diet actually make great converts to Bitcoin because they figured out I was lied to about nutrition. But the Bitcoiner figures out if I was lied to about money, maybe the same people that lied to me about money lied to me about nutrition. Maybe I shouldn't live on a food pyramid that looks like what's on the bag of cattle feed. Maybe that's not how I should eat.
Yeah.
Right? And then they're saying, well, if they lied to me about that, then maybe they lied to me about the way we produced it.
Yeah.
So now they're getting into things like regenerative agriculture. And like you see these bridges form. Texas Slim and his work with the beef initiative, that's huge, where he's teaching ranchers about Bitcoin, but teaching Bitcoiners about real ranch and real food and real quality, and shake a rancher's hand. And by the way, these ranchers will take Bitcoin as a form of payment.
Right.
Like these are the things we need to be switching people onto. And like my ultimate tool I try to teach people is how to spend Bitcoin without spending their Bitcoin. Like Strike's the best way to do that right now. You deposit dollars and you send Bitcoin and you never buy Bitcoin. And that way your stack stays growing.
Right.
And you start using more tech like that as well, because one of my big frustrations with Bitcoiners is they don't ever want to spend Bitcoin. I get it. But you don't have to spend you're to spend dollars. You could spend those dollars as Bitcoin. And that starts building this stronger circular economy. Because one thing we didn't get into today, Robert, is community. And all of this is jack squat if you don't have community around you, because the lone wolf paradigm does not work in the world of survivalism. It doesn't work in feeding yourself. It doesn't work in defending yourself. You've got to know your neighbors. You got to know the people you're doing business with. And Bitcoin just, like the second you start doing business with somebody that takes Bitcoin, you're dealing with somebody you have at least some level of
common values
with, right? They care about the things you care about. And that's who I want to be associating with, people that have a non-aggression principle as their guiding thing in life. And I find it's not everybody in Bitcoin, but man, it sure drags even statists toward at least libertarianism pretty quick. And if you stick around libertarianism long enough, us anarchists will pull you the rest of the way over. You will complete your training.
Yeah, no, the fiat currency pyramid scheme closely mirrors the government food pyramid scheme. No question about that. And it's a bitter realization, but better to know than not. Yeah, and it's seems to have very positive transformations in people's lives.
I mean, people have been lied about everything, and they believe the lie so openly. So we now have a world where people think that health insurance is healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare is healthcare. Right. Health insurance is insurance. Car insurance is not a transportation.
Right.
Homeowners insurance is not a dwelling. Insurance is insurance. The thing is the thing. What's the problem in healthcare? The problem in healthcare is everything's overpriced. Everything's a racket. The food is killing us. The food killing. If you fix the diet of Americans, half the healthcare companies would be out of business in 10 years.
That's right. Yeah.
They would.
Yeah, it's very, and this is what we try to surface or unearth on this show, is like the corruption of money seems to be very corrosive and corrupting to almost everything that it touches, and money touches almost everything. So, yeah, it's very hard to, in my opinion, to understate how ubiquitous this really is. Like and what do we say? We crystallize all of that and fix the money, fix the world.
Yeah. Here's an example of how bad this is. I can't remember the name of the company right now. I covered this about 3 weeks ago. I started seeing, Dr. Canberry is a good friend of mine, is on the show quite a bit. He was putting out these recipes that were coming from the American Diabetes Association. And they were things like sweetened pickles, like it's stuff with sugar in it. And I'm like, this is from the Diabetes Association. But then there was the name of this other company that it just won't come to me right now. But I looked this company up. They make dialysis equipment for kidney failure, and they are the largest inpatient or outpatient dialysis clinic in the country. They have like 3,300 clinics where people go in to get dialysis a couple times a week or whatever.
Uh-huh.
They're the ones providing the recipes. They're right on their website. And they say they care about your kidney health. Now, the only way this company makes money, the only way they make money is if people need dialysis. And the primary reason people need dialysis today is due to type 2 diabetes. And they're telling diabetics flat out to eat sugar and to add sugar into their healthy diabetic meals. Okay.
Corrupt.
That's because money, corrupt, you're right. Corrupt money corrupts everything that it touches.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It is,
It's all the time preference, man.
it is the ultimate uphill battle. And this is why, thank God for Bitcoin. Like, what would we do without Bitcoin? I don't exactly know, but, it's very, very exciting to be a part of all of this.
Yeah.
I have kept you long enough, good sir. This was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Jack, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can go to the survivalpodcast.com, but that's a lot of letters, so I have a short URL, tspc.co, and you can find all the social media I'm on and what have you. I'm on Twitter, and I have a YouTube channel and all the typical stuff. Everything's there. There's almost 3,300 episodes that we've done over almost 15 years now. We'll turn 15 in June. And if you want to know about something, the search bar is your friend. I think there's the most recent 800 episodes are on all the Stitcher and all that, because if you put too many in, you break it in 3,000.
Yeah.
WordPress pretty hard. But even the stuff that's aged out past that, you can listen to it for free on the site. I do have sponsors and stuff like that and some affiliate marketing, but most of my revenue comes from a membership program. So I don't sell product. I don't sell access. I don't have a paywall to anything. I believe you give away everything and build a strong community, and your community will give you back more than you would have ever asked for.
Yeah.
So everything is available for free. I even have mini courses on certain things like permaculture and stuff on my YouTube channel. That's all free.
Awesome. Jack, thank you so much for doing this. We'll link to all that in the show notes, and this was a great conversation. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me on. This was a great discussion. I really enjoyed it, Robert.